inside our CitrusTV studios for this edition of Cuse Countdown. Alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers, I'm Srikar, Rajendran. Fellas, what a day to be a Syracuse sports fan. You got women's lacrosse firing up in just about an hour, men's lacrosse at 2, both of them playing Maryland, and the nightcap, a duel in the Dome with Syracuse men's basketball and North Carolina. We'll be breaking down all these matchups, but first, starting with women's lacrosse. The season is still young for SU. Only one game played so far, a 21-9 win over UAlbany, but Nick Whaley has more on how exactly we got to this point. So not only will Nick Whaley be joining us a little bit later, but there's been a lot of change with this team as well. Obviously, no Delaney Schweitzer in net, no Emma Tyrell. So, Skyler, do you view this team as worse, better? How do you think they fare?
They're absolutely worse off, Srikar and AJ. I mean, it's undoubtable. You lose Tyrell Machesky, like you mentioned, but an underrated departure is Katie Goodale, who had a phenomenal year last year on the defensive side. Set the program record for most caused turnovers, was a first-team All-American, and they're already pretty young on the defensive side of the ball, with Coco Vanderverde and Casey Benoit, and now when you take away Bianca Chevry, you take away Katie Goodale, there is not a lot to work with on the defensive side of the ball for the Orange.
No, not at all, Skyler. I've said this on record a few times. I think the window for this team to win a national championship closed. I think last 2 seasons, that was the real opportunity for this team to grab a national championship. They could do that. I think the biggest loss out of everyone is Delaney Schweitzer. She was so solid in goal for this group. She started every game last year, 140 saves. That's a really impressive mark.
Well, Delaney Schweitzer, of course, you're only going to go as far as the person in net, and Schweitzer, of course, is that person. But with those losses come replacements, of course. You got to replenish what you lose. And for Syracuse, Daniela Guyette, Alexa Vogelman steps up into the midfield as a freshman. So, AJ, do you think they did a good job replenishing what they lost?
I think so. They're such a good team at recruiting players, Skyler. I'm not worried about the new players they brought in, but if they want to have success this year, they're going to have to lean on those veteran players. Emma Ward, I think, is going to have a huge season if this team wants to have success. She's going to need to be a leader for this team. Last year, she led the team in assists the past 2 seasons. Olivia Adamson, another really key player for this team. She had 6 points in the opener and career highs and everything last year. So those 2 players specifically are really going to need to have big years if this team wants to make another deep run.
They're really lucky that both Ward and Adamson are back, especially Ward, because she's kind of the engine that makes this team run, starting at X and really distributing the ball and can score with the best of them. Daniela Guyette, there's a lot of pressure. You're filling in really big shoes for Delaney Schweitzer, and didn't perform particularly well against UAlbany, allowed 6 goals and only made 3 saves. But you look at Alexa Vogelman, who missed all of last year with an injury, really talented freshman coming out of high school a year ago.
2 goals in the opener.
Right, and she can really provide a spark to this offense. Emma Muchnick is another player that, a revenge game today against Maryland, a former Terrapin herself. So she's been a really strong performer, a preseason second-team All-American, big expectations for SU, and some of those returners as well as the new freshmen.
Well, we can only say so much from the desk, but our reporter, Jake Klein, is out in Maryland, and hey, he's looking good, he's looking fresh. Jake, my question for you, we just talked about the turnover on both sides of the ball. Who do you think is the X factor for both sides, considering it may not be a name folks are familiar with?
Yeah, I think you guys just said it. It's the 2 goalies. It's Daniela Guyette for Syracuse and JJ Suriano for Maryland. They're both in very similar situations, having sat behind All-American caliber players in Delaney Schweitzer on the Syracuse side, in Emily Sterling on the Maryland side, and now their successors step in after a year waiting in the wings. These teams love to play in transition. They've lost a lot in the midfield. That's how they generate a lot of their offense. So whichever goalie can generate the most transition opportunities offensively and stop the most transition opportunities defensively, their team's going to have success today.
Jake, a big way to generate offense is winning the draws, and Syracuse lost one of the best of all time in Kate Machesky, the program's all-time draws leader. So there was a bit of a mixture in the last game against UAlbany. Megan Rowe won 11 draws, Alexa Vogelman won some. Is there a definitive draw control specialist for Kayla Trainer's squad?
I don't know, Skyler, and Kayla Trainer has been pretty non-committal on whether or not Megan Rode was going to see the majority of the time after that first game. Syracuse only out-controlled UAlbany 19-14 for that first game. Megan Rode did win 11 of those, but she had by far the most opportunities at the draw circle. So we don't really know, Skyler, to be honest. There's certainly no Kate Mashesky. It's going to be by committee to some degree. Whether or not Megan Rode steps up as that top player at the draw circle, I think we'll learn more certainly today.
Jake, good morning to you. We talked about Olivia Adamson and Emma Ward, but what other player, maybe a new player on the offensive side, really needs to step up if Syracuse wants to get the win today?
Boy, AJ, I think it's those freshmen and 3 points each for the four of them in that first game. I specifically look at Melina Cotter and Alexa Vogelman. I thought they were awesome in that first game against UAlbany, especially, like I mentioned earlier, in that transition game. That's a huge part of what Syracuse wants to do. We know the Orange are replacing so many star players from last season, and it's going to be that freshman class that has to step up if they want to recreate that production.
Well, Jake, thank you so much. We hope you enjoy the rest of your experience out in College Park and the game to come. But for us, guess who's back? Back again. It's Nick Whaley, who's going to dig deeper into how exactly we got to this point.
Well, thanks, Srikar. Last year was the third season under Kayla Trainer for Syracuse women's lacrosse, and it was a campaign that, on the surface at least, was very successful. A 16-6 record, 8-1 in conference play, 4 wins against top 10 teams, and a run to the NCAA tournament semifinals. It sounds great, doesn't it? Well, when you take a closer look, there are patterns of disappointment that are beginning to show. 2 of SU's 6 losses on the year were against the school that Trainer left to join the Cuse. You guessed it. It was Boston College. Both times it prevented the Orange from an accolade. First the ACC regular season title, then a spot in the national championship. Remember when I mentioned a pattern was forming? Well, take a look at what's happened when Trainer has come up against the team she coached for 4 years. The Orange are 0-6 against the Eagles in her tenure, twice during championship weekend. There's some Chestnut Hill voodoo going on for the Orange. 3 of those 6 losses were by just 1 goal. They will face off against the national champions at the end of the regular season once again. Can Trainer finally break the BC curse? Only time will tell. Still lots of lacrosse to get to this spring, starting with Maryland today. Guys, back to you.
Well, you mentioned, Nick, a lot of lacrosse to get to, and that rings true for us. We're going to take a short pause here on Cuse Countdown, but when we're back, the Maryland Terrapins are opening their season against this Syracuse team. We got to break them down. We'll be right back.
You quit smoking and thought, that's that. But here's the thing about lung cancer. By the time you see the symptoms, it could be too late. But now, there's a new scan that can detect lung cancer early, when it's more curable. If you smoked, get scanned. Talk to your doctor or learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers. I'm Srikar Rajendran, breaking down Syracuse women's lacrosse against a team that has yet to play this season in Maryland, and a lot of change for this team too. 10 seniors out, 11 freshmen in. Skyler, how do you feel about this team on paper?
It's tough to say, mostly because we haven't seen them play a game yet, and you just don't know. There's a lot of new faces, like you said, Srikar, but some of the key returners, Corey Edmondson, who was a second-team All-Big Ten last year, one of the best players on this team, and Hannah Lubecker is still there. They still have a lot of key pieces for Kathy Reese, but it's just hard to project how this team plays out when we haven't seen them play a game.
Yeah, it's tough. They haven't played a game yet, but they kind of have a similar issue to what Syracuse has. Their starting goalie last season, Emily Sterling, she started 19 of 20 games, over 80% of the minutes in net. She was a key figure for this team. She's gone, so they're going to have to replace her. New goalie, that's always a tough challenge for any team, regardless if they're a talented one or not.
Well, names like Corey Edmondson in the midfield, Kennedy Major on defense, still big-time players. I mean, last year when Syracuse played Maryland, Corey Edmondson had a hat trick. So, AJ, there is a lot of turnover, but there's still some pieces here that can really help.
Yeah, some key returners on this Terrapins team that are going to be a big help if they're going to want to beat Syracuse today and have success down the line. Kennedy Major, another really important player for this team on the defensive side of the field. She's going to be key as well if this team wants to have success. They do have important returners, but there are, as we mentioned, some big losses as well.
Hannah Lubecker is probably the biggest returner out of them all, at least on Syracuse's eyes, who kind of put the game away for the Terrapins last year. These two teams have a storied history against each other, two of the best programs in college lacrosse. But whenever you have Kathy Reese leading the helm of your team, it's always a tough battle for Kayla Traynor.
Well, both teams have been covered in full here. For us, it's 1 down and it's 2 to go. When we return on the countdown, we're going to flip sides a little bit here. Same sport, same teams, but it's men's lacrosse time. We'll be back on the countdown. Back on Cuse Countdown alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers, I'm Srikar Rajendran. A whole lot of Terps, whole lot of orange on this show. Maryland getting ready to take on Syracuse men's lacrosse. But last time out for Maryland, it was a tight one, an 8-7 win over Loyola. Skyler, it was a close game. Any worries for you?
I am a little worried. I mean, this is a Maryland team that lost a lot of key pieces from last year, and Loyola, you know, Srikar, your guy Pat Spencer is not really there anymore, so this is not the same Greyhounds team that they were in years past. Maryland should have been able to handle them more efficiently, so you got to give Loyola a lot of credit for sticking with them. A 1-point overtime win. John Tillman has got to expect better out of his squad.
Yes, it was, kind of a concerning start, Skyler, but also I'm taking that away from that game is how well Maryland responded. It was a 3-goal deficit. They scored 4 goals in 4 minutes to take the lead. Now, Loyola did get one at the end to send it into overtime, but I think it says a lot about this team and how they responded and came back in a game where it looked as though they were getting upset.
Well, Pat Spencer or no Pat Spencer, this team is going to be a lot different, but one thing that has remained constant is Maryland always seems to beat Syracuse. Ever since Gary Gait was installed as head coach, it hasn't really changed much, but with new teams now, last year Syracuse did lose in overtime. AJ, I think there's some more favorable matchups this time around.
I think, yes, there maybe are a little bit more favorable matchups, but it's still a really strong Terrapins team. And Syracuse, Scott, they're going to have to be on their A game if they want to win this one.
Well, I think the big thing is no Ajax Zapatello. He completely shut down Joey Spallina last year. I mean, really hard for this Syracuse offense to operate. And now that he's not there anymore, Syracuse, this offense has already proved to be super potent. Maryland's got to figure out a way to play and guard Spallina without having to maybe double him, because there's just so many weapons on this offense that without Ajax Zapatello, they really don't have as many guys to guard.
Yeah, I think, and going back to that game last year, it was a thriller. 7 ties in that one, a really exciting game. I think, Srikar, we're in for something similar like that. Important to note, John Tillman in his entire career with Maryland, he has won over 160 games. Maryland scores more than 10 goals. So Syracuse got to hold the Terrapins to under 10 if they want to win.
Well, holding them to under 10 is going to be a little bit of a challenge here because that attack is still lethal. You look at names like Eric Spanos, Matthew Keegan, Daniel Kelly. Skyler, still some juice there.
Yeah, Spanos scored 4 goals against Loyola, but Braden Urksa, who was on that team last year, played really good lacrosse. Maryland is always going to have weapons, but another key departure is Luke Weirman at the faceoff X. He's not there anymore, and that is a really big loss for the Terps, who really rely on him. But like I said, you have Spanos, you have Urksa. That's a big help for your offense because Syracuse, the defense has been really strong, but you never know what's going to happen. There's a lot of veteran presence on that defense, but you still have a young goalie in Jimmy McCool.
Yeah, you do. And I think this is similar to Syracuse's attack last season, kind of getting off to slow starts. Look at that Loyola game. They got off to a slow start, then they scored a flurry of goals in that fourth quarter. In total, they have 16 overtime wins, this attack. So you don't really want to get this attack in late, tight games because they are clutch. They can hit those big shots, score those big goals when a game gets tight. So it's something for Syracuse to be watchful of. Maybe get a big lead. Don't give this attack any fuel to potentially come back.
And just like how the number 44 has a ton of significance in Syracuse, it's one for Maryland that holds a lot of regard in College Park. And our Andrew Della Piana has more on the legacy of this single digit.
Hey, thanks so much, Srikar. When you think of Maryland lacrosse, what comes to mind? And don't say crab cakes. Why don't you think about more than 500 All-Americans, and how about the double-digit national championships? But for head coach John Tillman, it all starts with the people inside his building.
When it comes to recruiting, when it comes to what we're trying to do here, not everybody's going to be an All-American. Not everybody can have a 4.0, but you can try to be the best version of yourself. And we know once you get out there, you're going to be competing with, other people for job opportunities, for promotions, for opportunities.
I mean, Tillman is right. His resume speaks for himself. Culture, an integral part of the oldest team sport in the world, and Maryland is the cradle of the game. And with that comes a very, very rich tradition. Maryland has built a strong set of values over its 100 seasons, making winning not just the expectation, but the standard. As part of this tradition, the Terrapins reserve the #1 jersey for program standouts. For decades, this number has been both honored and cherished within the program. It signifies a player who embodies exceptional performance and leadership on and off the field, upholding the program's standard of excellence. The #1 represents being the best, perfectly aligned with the program's mantra, be the best, coined in the 1970s. Legendary Terps who have worn the #1 jersey include Andrew Whipple in the 1990s, Joe Walters in the 2000s, and of course Matt Rambo, who led the undefeated 2017 National Championship team. Over the years, #1 has symbolized excellence, fire, and finesse. Now, the newest member of the number is making history of his own. Logan McNeely, know the name, just the second goalie ever to wear the jersey number since Melvin Stevens did it back in 1989. McNeely back for his 6th season with the program, having become a full-time starter on that undefeated 2022 championship team, where he was named the NCAA tournament's most outstanding player. The graduate student started 2 games the next season before tearing his ACL in his right knee during a game against Loyola. He returned last season, though, to play at his usual form, finishing 10 games with a save percentage of .500 or better. Now in 2025, he continues to make history, becoming just the 4th Terp in program history to eclipse 600 career stops. McNeely also named to the Tewaaraton watch list before the season and is determined to honor the legendary single digit that he wears on his front chest. All right, it's time for a quick break on Live Cuse Countdown, but when we come back, we'll take a look at the Syracuse side of things. You won't want to go anywhere.
Back at ya on Cuse Countdown alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers. I'm Srikar Rajendran breaking down Syracuse men's lacrosse against Maryland. Now, it's time to look into SU. This team is 3-0 to start the year, with the latest win being an 18-7 win over a ranked Towson squad. Skyler, does that win give you hope at all going into this matchup, or have things still kind of been the same for you?
No, I've been really impressed with the Syracuse lacrosse team. I mean, the expectations have always been high under Gary Gait, but it seems like they're reaching a whole new level. Towson, to beat them the way you did and dismantle a ranked team like that says a lot about how good this team is, how deep this team is, and just how dangerous they can really be. I've been super impressed with what I've seen from this offense, from what I've seen from this defense, really all the way around. There aren't very many weaknesses to this team.
No, those first 3 games of the year for Gary Gait's group, they were supposed to be winnable games, and they did. They handled expectations against Towson. That was the toughest of the 3, and Syracuse, they built a big lead at start. Then it got close. It was 11-7 in the fourth quarter. That's still a game. 1 or 2 more goals from Towson, and then it could have been a nervy atmosphere in the Dome. But Syracuse, they handled business. An 18-7 win. I love how this tack just finishes games. Either they're starting quick and ending the game right away by getting out to a 7-8 goal lead, or as we saw against Towson, in the fourth quarter, they get a flurry of goals, end the game. Last year, Srikar, we didn't always see that from this team. We saw too many games get way, way too close. I think in the UNC game in the regular season, they had that one, then it got close, nervy finish. Too many games got too close last season. Even in the NCAA first round against Towson, that got close as well. Too many games got too close last season. I really like so far how this team has been able to finish games, put them to bed, especially winnable games.
That's a good point, AJ, is the inability to finish was something that we saw a lot last year. I mean, even that game against Maryland where Syracuse was in front and just couldn't capitalize that open shot that Michael Leo had on goal that he missed wide. So to beat a ranked team like this from wire to wire says a lot about the growth of this team.
Yeah, and they're going to need to do that to either get out to a fast start or in one of those quarters build a big lead, because Maryland, they like to come back into games. So they're going to have to be on their toes a little bit more than they were in the first 3 games, Srikar, but I have a lot of confidence from this team from the first 3 games of the season.
Well, complete is the name of the game, as our analysts like to say here, but you mentioned a good point with the attack. It's one aspect that really hasn't lacked at all for Syracuse this season. We know the names. We know Joey Spallina, Owen Hiltz, and a surging Luke Roa now. I mean, where did that come from? But this team is also completely playing as a full unit. AJ, it's been super cohesive.
It has. It's really impressive what I've seen from Gary Gait's attack. It's definitely the best part of this team, Skyler. It has to be. This team can score so many goals and so many acrobatic goals. It's like every game you watch, it's like, oh, where's that SC top 10 play going to be? It's not just about Joey Spallina. I think in years past, maybe at times last season, there was a reliance on Spallina to just go out there and do some magic. Ron James with the Cavs or something like that. They're not solely relying on Joey Spallina to win them games. They have Michael Leo. They have Fid Thompson. So many options. I really want to highlight Michael Leo. Out of all these attackers, he was not named to the Tewaaraton watch list. I think he has a fire under him to really go out there and perform and show that he can be maybe the best option to score goals, because Joey Spallina doesn't necessarily have to be getting all these goals because he has other options to lean on.
That's the biggest growth I think we've seen in Joey Spallina's game, AJ, is the fact that everyone is expecting number 22 from Syracuse. He's got to score all these goals, but that's just not him. He's a great passer. And look at that there. He has more assists already than goals. That's just what his game is. And you pair him with Finn Thompson and Owen Hiltz, 2 guys who are lethal shooters. Joey Spallina has such great vision that he can make such great passes and find those open teammates. And then you add that great midfield line to it. Luke Roa, Michael Leo, you talked about it. Jackson Burtwhistle is still on the team. There's just so many weapons. If you're an opposing defense, you look at this team and you're like, how can I stop all of these players? Because there's just too many guys.
You look at every box score, Srikar, and it's like, oh, who didn't get a hat trick?
It's crazy.
And I think something you said key was, for something you said, Sky, that was really key, is Joey Spallina is distribution. Let him work at X. He is such a good passer of the ball. He can find all these players, and all these players can score goals with their eyes closed, it seems like.
And you mentioned the SportsCenter top 10, like, holy cow. Yeah. The goals are ridiculous. You look at them and it's like, how did you score that
It's like
goal?
the Harlem Globetrotters.
It's exactly like that. And the first goal of the season from Luke Roa was like, that was one of the most impressive goals I've ever seen.
Tug on the back of the jersey, basically flying through the air. It's incredible. But those are the non-negotiables. We knew the attack would be good. One question coming into the season was how good the face-off unit would be. John Mullen, not too shabby, 17 for 25 against Towson. But Skyler, are you impressed? Or do you still need to see a little bit more?
No, I mean, I was sold on him last year watching him play backing up Mason Cohen. That was such an impressive tandem at the face-off X. And Towson has a really good face-off guy in Constantinides. So for Mullen to handle him the way he did says a lot about his growth as a player. I mean, he was really impressive last year as a true freshman. I was beyond ready to see him take over that starting spot with Mason Cohn out of the picture. John Mullen has the potential to be one of the top Fogos in the entire country. But I only expect to see him in year number 2, 3 games in, he's already strong. He's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I could agree with you more, Skyler. Last season, SU, when Mullen won the faceoff, they scored 34 goals. That shows how important it is when he's getting those faceoff wins. SU tends to be winning games, and I don't think he has a lot of competition. Johnny Retrusa hasn't looked that great. He's 5 of 15 so far this season. He hasn't really shown to me that he can put any pressure on Mullen. I have the confidence in Mullen, and I think that's a good thing that he doesn't have any pressure behind him. He's not worried about losing his spot. I think he knows this is his spot to dominate in, and this is going to be a real big test. I know that Towson was a test, you mentioned that, but this is a top 10 team in Maryland. He's going to have to be on his A game because, as we know, Srikar, when this team does not win face-offs, go back 2 seasons ago, they are not winning games.
And you're right, AJ, where the fact that Mullen, he doesn't really have any pressure behind him. So it's kind of his job to lose, and he can just go with that. He doesn't need to feel like one mistake could cost him his job.
Exactly.
Well, when you mess up the face-off game, it really doesn't help you anywhere else, especially on defense. It makes things harder for the guy in net. And Syracuse has a fresh face in that regard, Jimmy McCool. And our Gino Antamarino has more on this new goalie.
Jimmy McCool has gotten the starting nod in goal for Syracuse men's lacrosse this season, and everyone's asking, who is this cool guy from Boston anyways, and how did he get so good at stopping shots?
It's kind of a funny story. So I first started lacrosse, I was in the net. I was kind of just the test dummy for my 2 older brothers in whatever sport they were doing at the time. And then started playing lacrosse officially in town league. Really liked the sport, but didn't love the running. So I decided to stay in the net and kind of time out when I have to make my big runs.
But Jimmy didn't just learn from his brothers. He also learned from a familiar face here in SU, Will Mark.
Yeah, he's been the best. He was kind of, the guy I just always looked to for any advice, anything I needed. And he's been one of my best friends, even still after he's graduated. We're talking almost every day, and I actually owe him a phone call tonight. But yeah, he's been huge for me, just kind of always in my corner. I was always in his when he needed it, and just kind of that back and forth relationship I think was huge for both of us.
Now the Tewaaraton nominee has certainly rubbed off on Jimmy. The redshirt sophomore has put up a .674 save percentage this season, 3rd best in the country, and a .526 goals against average, 4th best in the country. But Jimmy says it's not all about making flashy saves. That was too fast! Flashy saves. But Jimmy says it's not all about making flashy saves like that one right there. Come on now, that makes up for a good defense.
No, the defense is always unreal, and they try to give me the shots I want to see, and so far they've been doing a great job of that. So I'll always be thankful for them. They're putting their bodies out on the line with even less equipment than I'm wearing. They're just as likely to get hit sometimes as I am. So whenever they're doing their thing and we're playing together as a unit, I'm always going to be appreciative of them. They've been unreal for me so far.
Now, having a good family by his side and also a good defense in front of him is not the only support that Jimmy and a good goaltender needs. Oh.
Invest in a good cup. I think that's the most important thing from the get-go. And then, just find the joy and, like I said, kind of being that party stopper. The offense likes to hoot and holler, but when you make that save and you see their whole sideline kind of depleted, that's an unreal feeling.
Now, head coach Gary Gate and company are hopeful that Jimmy McCool can step up and make big saves en route to a national championship. Reporting from South Campus here in Syracuse, I'm Gino Antamarino, CitrusTV.
Hey, Gino, I appreciate the effort, but if it were me, I think I'm saving that on the first try. But I feel like I've been talking too much, so I'm going to summon another reporter, and it's Dan Shalom, who's out in Maryland breaking down this one. Dan, you're looking good. My question for you regards what we talked about earlier with the face-offs. Do you think John Mullen's going to find success today?
Srikar, I actually want to go back to last year's matchup before we even got to talking about Johnny Mullen. Both of the Fogos this year for Syracuse and Maryland didn't really play that much last year. Maryland won the face-off battle last year 16-13, and that was all between last year Mason Cohn and Luke Weirman. Both those guys have graduated since then, and they're both All-Americans. Now it's time for both the backups from last year to step up. So it's going to be all really Johnny Mullen. We'll see how he does. 17 for 25 in his last game. And I think the biggest thing for him is just staying cool, calm, and composed. He was telling me after last game that he just likes to get the ball to the wings, and that's the biggest thing for this team. If you see them succeed on offense, the way that they're getting so many possessions all starts from the face-off X, particularly with Mullen feeding to the wings, get Syracuse inside the offensive zone, then they can really get to work. He also says he likes to storm down and shoot, so we'll see if we get some of that today. But for Syracuse, the game plan, Mullen win the draw, get it out to the wings, and see if they can get some offense there. It's going to be hard for Syracuse, no doubt, with Mullen. Only his, the fourth game of the season inside of the X as a starter, but so far has been strong.
Cool, calm, and collector. At least I think you do. I can't really see you through the fog there. But you'll know who's off to a really strong start this season. Luke Roa, 8 goals in 3 games. He had just 20. He had 20 goals in 18 games last year. So Roa, he's part of that impressive midfield line. You think the junior can continue the success he's had so far this season?
So Luke Rowe is a guy that's kind of come out of the shadows for this team. Only had 21 points last season, and he's already got 8 this year. 4 in his first 2 games and 4 last game. And really, last matchup was the game where we saw Luke Rowe really show his true dominance. He was ripping shots from 20 yards out and tickling the twine. He's going to try and do the same thing here today. But Gary Gate has really preached that it's all about team chemistry for this offensive unit. The reason that Rowe is getting so many chances is simply because Spalina and Hiltz and other guys on the team are sharing the ball like they haven't been in years past. And they want Roa to be a weapon that teams don't really see. You can't go to Spalina or a different guy in the offense. Feed Roa because he has a rocket of a shot. He's not afraid to show it, and he's already on pace to break his season total from last year in just the first 8 games of this season. So Roa can really be an X factor for this team, even if you don't see it.
Dan, AJ here. Gino just harped on it, but do you have any concern with Jimmy McCool, especially in a top 10 matchup today?
Jimmy McCool, what a story for this guy now, replacing the one and only from last year, Will Mark. He's been so dominant for Syracuse so far this season. 9 saves in every single game, had a season high 11 against Vermont. And talking to him a couple of days ago before Syracuse traveled down here to Maryland, he said the reason that he's been so successful this year is all that training under Will Mark from last season. He still talks to him every single day. In fact, talking to him before this Maryland game this afternoon, just getting as much insight as possible. And he said really that development year under Mark, seeing what made him so effective is really what's making him so good out there on the field to start this year. And he's also talked about just how effective his defense has been as well. If you look at guys like Billy Dwan, Riley Figueres, and Michael Grace, they've done a great job at trapping these defenders, really forcing those shot clock violations all the way through. And it's made it so easy in the cage for Jimmy McCool right now. It's going to be a struggle for sure against Maryland, maybe to start out today. Syracuse first road test of the year against a top 6 opponent. It's something that McCool hasn't experienced. It's something that this defensive unit hasn't experienced. But I'll tell you this much. If someone's ready to take on the Terps, it's Jimmy McCool.
Dan, thank you so much for your insight live on site. Go treat yourself to some crab cakes. But for us, though, it's hoops time. Syracuse men's basketball goes to battle against North Carolina in the Dome tonight. Time to discuss. Stay tuned. Cuse Countdown is back alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers. I'm Srikar Rajendran. One more sport left on the docket for us today, and that is Syracuse men's basketball gearing up to take on North Carolina. But the last time out for this team, pretty much a nightmare. A 91-84 loss to Miami. Skyler, not a pretty sight at all.
No, I think that's putting it nicely, Srikar. Miami has been one of the worst teams, the worst team in the ACC, had just 5 wins coming in and picked Syracuse apart. I mean, the Orange led by at most 3 points, and that was for only a few minutes. It was basically a wire-to-wire victory for the Hurricanes, and it's completely embarrassing. Syracuse has already had a down year, close wins over schools like Lemoyne and Youngstown State, but Miami, it seemed like you were right back on track. You escaped that triple overtime win over BC. You got to take care of business on the road against Miami, and instead, they lose. You see, first loss to the worst ACC team in 8 years. I mean, there's just nothing good about that game.
That's unacceptable for this Syracuse team to have such a bad loss like that. And you mentioned those first 3 games of the year. That should have been a massive foreshadowing for everyone following Syracuse men's basketball and how poor this team would be. They looked awful against Miami. The thing that jumps out to me the most is that the Hurricanes were not a good three-point shooting team. Srikar. They hit 10 threes. Now Syracuse, they had 8, which is pretty good, but they went 8 of 21, so there was a lot of misses in those three-point attempts.
Good.
10 threes from the Hurricanes was something nobody expected. Matthew Cleveland, I mean, they made him look like LeBron James in that game. He was going off. He had 32 points. Lucas Taylor had a really, really poor game. Everyone had a really poor game. I thought Chris Bell got off to a good start. He had 12 points in the first half. Guess how many he had in the second half? Just 2. That basically sums up Chris Bell's season for you. It was a real encapsulation of what this team is this season. Not that talented. There were sparks at times. Jaquan Carlos hit a few threes towards the end of the game. But outside of that, he had a really bad game, especially on the defensive end. Just a really poor game overall. It's going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back against what is not a great UNC team, but still a solid one. Better than Miami was.
Well, we're scrambling for answers here at the desk, but one reason that Syracuse has been floundering of late is not having a guy like Donnie Freeman out on the court. The freshman was sidelined for the rest of the season with a lower leg injury. AJ, that impact can truly be felt if he's not on the floor.
I think so, but I don't know, Skyler. I really have no idea because we've seen this guy in one or two really good games. The one that sticks out to me is Cornell. He looked dominant in that game, but outside of that, I don't know. He always looked kind of average. He never really looked like that 5-star recruit that he was supposed to live up to. His season's unfortunately over with that injury. It'll be interesting to see if we ever see him in a Syracuse uniform again. I don't think it's out of the question. I think it's similar to Judah Mid's scenario. If he's not healthy come NBA Combine time, and then I think he'll be back. Or if scouts tell him you're not ready yet, I think he will come back for another year. But this season definitely was a disappointment for him. And I don't know what difference he would have made against Miami because prior to that game, before he got hurt, he hadn't shown me any ability that he could win this team game single-handedly, other than Cornell.
Yeah, single-handedly, I think you're right there. I mean, obviously, he's a talented player that was going to contribute and score. I mean, he's second on the team in points at just over 13 a game. But you're right, AJ. I just don't know if he really makes that much of an impact. I think he's giving Peter Majstorovic a chance to really shine, who's got a longer future projection-wise with this team. Donnie Freeman is someone who may not be back next year, but even if he's back in college basketball, I don't know if he comes back to Syracuse even. Yeah. Because, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Maryland comes in and poaches him away, brings him to the Big Ten, gets him closer to home in that DMV area. Donnie Freeman was a talented player, but he never lived up to that, highest ranked recruit since Carmelo Anthony. Well, Carmelo Anthony, his freshman year, led this team to a national championship.
That ain't happening.
It's big expectations here, Skyler.
Right, and Donnie Freeman was never going to live up to those expectations. They were unrealistic. But you expected him to do a little bit more, and nothing he could do to avoid that injury. But you're right. I think his overall impact on this team, this team's success wasn't driven by Donnie Freeman.
No, not at all. And the talent's there. There's no doubt about it. Every time I watched him play, I thought, oh, it looks like Kevin Durant. The way he could get in the paint, step back, and get an easy 2 like that. He has the ability to be a talented player, but unfortunately, in year 1, and maybe the only year we see him in orange, did not live up to those expectations.
Well, with the way the season has been for the Orange, why not fire up the age-old conversation on Adrian Autry? Because the head man has been in a lot of discourse so far. Skyler, what have your thoughts been on the job he's done?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to say he hasn't done a good job whatsoever. Andrew Autry, really nice guy, and he's a great player in his own right here on the hill.
20 games his first year.
Which was impressive, but the losses this year have been bad. Even the wins haven't been particularly impressive. I mean, you're going to double overtime with Youngstown State. triple overtime with Boston College. That's not really a good thing. And I know our friend Jay Klein, he might be in College Park. He's a huge supporter of Brian Hodgson, the head coach at Arkansas State, who is a Western New York guy to come in. And I'm not necessarily calling for Autry's job, but it's really, really disappointing. This is a Syracuse basketball brand that is really known nationwide, even worldwide. And Autry is damaging the reputation of this team. He's done a phenomenal job recruiting, but that can only mean so much. You got to actually win games when you're coaching this team, and he just hasn't done that. He just looks out of his element, right? Not good at in-game adjustments. The offense is bad. There isn't a whole lot to like about the job that Adrian Autry has done coaching this team this season.
No, and the question is, are the X's and O's there? That is the question. Can he be that in-game coach? I wouldn't say I could pinpoint a game where he lost the game. I looked at that Miami game and saying, oh, could he have maybe started Chris Bell in the second half? But then I think about it more. Would that really have made a difference? I have no idea. I don't think they should fire Adrian Autry. I think that would be a massive mistake from John Wildhack, because with recruits, if you let go of the guy that brought in some of these recruits, that brought in Kai and Anthony, you let that guy go, then maybe those guys decommit. College basketball is such a wild landscape these days. Athletics in college are now so crazy in how players transfer and stuff. You need to have a solidified voice for at least, I think, 5 years. Someone there who we know is leading the program. How well he's leading it, that's the question.
5 years is a bit too long for Adrian Autry.
You think it's too long? I also think you can't forget about what he did in year one. I don't think you can.
But it's a marked,
Yes, sure, it's a year by year.
It's a huge difference between year one and year two.
It's what have you done for me lately, and lately he hasn't done anything great for this team, but I still think you got to put faith in him. I think he needs to reassess how he addresses the transfer portal, because that's why I think this year has been such a calamity, because he missed on too many of those transfers. Lucas Taylor hasn't been there. Jaquan Carlos hasn't been there either. Those were guys he was expected to rely on. Didn't work out. And also, I don't think he expected Chris Bell to be coming off the bench. He expected him to be a leader on this team, a knockdown three-point shooter.
Different expectations.
That hasn't happened either.
For sure, but another team that's been a little inconsistent, the Tar Heels, but they are looming here, and we're going to be breaking down this team when we return on the Countdown.
Women are bad with money.
It's what the world's been saying for centuries. But now,
we've got something to say. Save it.
Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses.
It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence.
Until we're no longer
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that, save it.
The falsehoods, the feelings of fault, then the funds.
Learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers. I'm Srikar Rajendran. Still breaking down Syracuse men's basketball against North Carolina. The Tar Heels, though, fellas, not the same team we're used to seeing, especially with a brand like North Carolina. Skyler, who do you blame here?
I think you have to blame Hubert Davis, right? I mean, he's another in the same spot as Adrian Autry.
One coach to another.
Right? Filled in for a legendary coach, an alum of the program, and just hasn't had the same success. He's done a little bit better in the transfer portal. They just haven't translated to wins. It's really surprising to see that this Tar Heel team is struggling the way they are. Such a legendary brand in college basketball, and they had good players on paper. It just has not translated to wins.
Last year it was all sunshine. They had a great ACC campaign last season. I know they fell flat in the NCAA tournament, but this season has not gone well. And what really stands out to me is just one quad one win. In those big games, they really have not lived up to expectations, and that's something that UNC tends to do. They tend to play well in those big games. This season just has not been the case. And yeah, transfer portal, maybe they missed this year a little bit, but it's been a surprise. I did not expect North Carolina to be this poor.
Well, one of the key cogs of this engine that is the North Carolina offense is the play of RJ Davis. He scored in double digits the past 7 games. AJ, he's always a threat.
He is, and it feels like he's been on this North Carolina team forever. I feel like I've been watching him for so many years, but from a Syracuse perspective, I'm worried. Because if Matthew Cleveland could have 32 points against this Orange team, I don't know how many points RJ Davis can have. He's averaging around 17 a game. He's a sneaky guard. He could get to the paint, but he could also knock down threes, as you just saw there. If I'm Syracuse, I am worried because Lucas Taylor did not look good defending Matthew Cleveland. I'm assuming that'll be his matchup. Today will be RJ Davis. Unless you're going to put Starling on him, I'm worried because I feel like RJ Davis could have a big game.
RJ Davis is kind of like the Armando Bacot of UNC guards. Been in college forever, had successful college careers. He's a certified bucket. He can really score the basketball. Had both 22 and 19 against Syracuse a year ago. You gotta make sure that you're keeping eyes on him at all times. You can't let him go off like a Matthew Cleveland, even like a Jaleel Bethia. Davis, maybe keep 2 guys on him, not necessarily, or maybe go into his zone. Try to eliminate his chances to score the basketball with ease.
Autry tried a zone against Miami in the first 5 minutes, and then he got rid of it because it clearly was not working.
But RJ Davis, not the only guy for Syracuse. Our Nathaniel Cunningham has more on Elliot Cadeau's success.
Thanks, Srikar. When you talk about UNC men's basketball, there's a whole lot that you can talk about with this guard depth. From the starting lineup to the bench, the front or the backcourt action is through and through, and you have to mention Elliot Cadeau in that name. The New Jersey native took a step up from his freshman campaign as he's shooting nearly 40% from beyond the arc, but it's not just his action from deep that has really seen success because his overall offensive game has really taken a step up from how it was a year ago. You take a look about what he did against Cal. You can see that play where he's cutting into the paint, but it's not just his ability to finish around the rim. Let's pause real quick right here. He notices that this Golden Bears defender is deep inside the paint. Traditionally, they'll come up and kind of play preventing the mid-range. He notices that, knows he can beat his defender, and decides, well, that's an easy 2 at the rack, so let me go up there and take it. He has the ability to see the entire court, see the opposing defense, and make decisions that way. But it's not just Cadeau's offense that makes him special, but his defense. When you take a look about what he did earlier this season against American, he caused a lot of pressure and really forced turnovers that led into UNC's pace of play style that they love to do. Let's take a pause right here. Take a look at where he's picking up this guard. It's in the backcourt. He's caused so much pressure that he's forcing American to make moves in a full court man-to-man press. And ultimately, you saw the result. When he gets in there, he uses his quick hands, and the next thing you know, the ball's in his hands, and he's slamming it home. Cadeau is a big piece to UNC's fast pace, and that's the thing that Syracuse has to watch out for if they want a chance at taking down the Tar Heels like they did a season ago. Coming up here on Live CC, though, we're sitting down with a special guest. It's Carson Fowler here inside our CitrusTV studios. You won't want to go anywhere here on Live CC.
Welcome to my house. Lately, not my happy place. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The parents were not themselves. My little brothers were morphing into small creatures. The walls were closing in. Clearly a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. And there's a lot of that going around right now. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It might not get you out of the house, but it could help you find a little more breathing room.
Well, it's been about 50 minutes here on Cuse Countdown, so I know you might be tired of seeing my face. Here's a fresh one, Carson Fowler, who's going to be reporting from the Dome tonight, Syracuse men's basketball against North Carolina. Carson, always a pleasure to have you on. My question for you regards Eddie Lampkin, the big guy, the physicality. Yep. Been a double-double machine this season. How is UNC going to guard him?
Yeah, he had a double-double last week against Miami, and I expect a lot of double teams from North Carolina. Eddie Lampkin, given his size, strength, and ability to score around the basket, will make him a threat against North Carolina. That is very undersized this year. Their 4 leading guards, and Ian Jackson, RJ Davis, Seth Tremble, and Elliot Cadeau are all under 6'4". Eddie Lampkin, a really good playmaker, and he's going to have to show it off against the Tar Heels because they're going to double team him in the low post, and he's going to have to look for Syracuse's shooters. Need a big game from J.J. Starling and Chris Bell at the three-point line. Another thing also, Eddie Lampkin turns the ball over a good bit, so he needs to play a really good game. And my last point, note the Tar Heels' the tallest player, 6'10" center Jalen Washington. He only plays 20 minutes a game, and he had 11 minutes in logged against their loss against Clemson last week, so needed Eddie Lampkin to have a big game, and I think he could.
Well, surprise! It's me now instead of
Play a little
Srikar.
switcheroo.
And you talked about the size of Eddie Lampkin.
Totally.
Now let's go to the backcourt. RJ Davis, we talked about him a little
Right.
bit, how impressive he is as a scorer, top 10 in the ACC in points. He had 22 last year and 19 against Syracuse. So how can the Orange contain RJ Davis?
Yeah, get the ball out of his hands quickly. The guy plays really good basketball. I mean, he was the preseason ACC Player of the Year for a reason. Obviously, not playing the game to his standards. Obviously, this year, 21 points per game last year, 17 points per game this year prior. And for RJ Davis, he's really struggled to shoot the three ball this year. But don't let that fool you. His last 7 games, he's shooting 45%. Another thing, he's got a Steph Curry-like release, really quick, likes to get to his spot, so don't let him. He also turns the ball over a good bit as well, so force the pressure action early. Lucas Taylor, you mentioned earlier, he's probably going to be the guy that's going to be guarding RJ Davis, but get some switches on him. Double team him a lot, get the ball out of his hands, make him force the issue. And last thing, he's really good in the transition. He's really good at absorbing contact, and he'll make you pay at the free throw line too. He shoots it at about 86%.
All right, you got the second analyst. Second is the best. I'm kidding, Skyler. We love you. Carson, great to have you on the show. I want to talk about Adrian Autry. We were just talking about him. I think he should stay. I think he is the guy for this program. What if he gets a win today? Remember last season when UNC came to the Dome, Syracuse won, fans stormed the court, all looked great for Autry. What if something similar like that happens today? How does the persona change around Autry?
Yeah, AJ, this game is a lot different than last year, obviously. I mean, these are two programs that are seriously struggling in their second year under head coach Adrian Autry, who obviously had 20 wins last year. But last year's game was against the 7th-ranked team in the nation. This year, it's a 14-11 North Carolina squad coming in. They're 6.5-point favorites. I spoke with an alum last night, and he's really just been trounced of what Syracuse basketball has become under Adrian Autry in just 2 years. He said his biggest concern with Autry is his inability to develop players. You guys talked about Donnie Freeman coming to Syracuse, the 2nd overall rated prospect to ever commit the Orange under, forget the first guy's name for the last of me, but what has he done this year? 14 points per game, 8 rebounds. A good year for his terms, but just not the Syracuse standard. And obviously Syracuse 11-14 this year, and they haven't done much. I think he's tossed. There's a reason that this game, you can buy tickets for $4 on Vivid Seats.
I'm back. But it's only to say farewell, of course. Carson, thank you so much for your insight. We hope you have a great time in the Dome tonight. You can go ahead and tune into Carson tonight as he tweets from the Dome. But for us, we're wrapping up shop here on live Cuse Countdown. Going to give our predictions before we close out. Stay tuned.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Wrapping up slowly here on Cuse Countdown alongside Skyler, Wilkes, and AJ Myers. I'm Srikar Rajendran. Now, fellas, we've broken down all these games. I know we're exhausted, but we have to keep pushing here because we have to give our predictions for all 3 of these games. But let's take a look back at what happened last week because sure did. A lot of things happened, but it's going to be interesting to see how we can follow up this performance from the Cuse Countdown crew. We have Chloe Smars went 1-0. We have an 0-0 from Gino Antamarino.
Come on, Gino.
Where's the pick? Where's the pick here? And Andrew Delapiano also a 1-0. So I guess the goal for us is 3-0 here. It's a tougher task, but I think we got what it takes because the standings, we're looking good. I mean, me and AJ.
How did I end up in last? How did I end up in last?
Guys, it's one game.
I've been on one show. How did I end up in last?
I was on one show too.
I think we need to talk to the higher ups here.
I think we do. I think it's unfair, but we have a chance to redeem ourselves here, starting with women's lacrosse. Skyler, who you got?
Yeah, well, definitely trying not to be at the bottom there with you guys, but I also have the Terrapins winning this game 12-9. Syracuse, I just am not super confident in this team. All the departures that we talked about earlier, I just am so uncertain about what Kayla Traynor has with her team here. You got some really talented players, Ward and Adamson, and Muchnick is still there. But with Guyette, I just don't know. I'm not super confident. We don't know what the draw circle is really going to look like, whether Megan Road is going to carry the load or not. And the defense is solid, but again, no Chevry, no Goodale. There's just so many pieces missing that I'm not sure if I'm really confident in the Syracuse team. And now you're on the road at College Park, a Maryland team ready to start its season. I just feel like this could go not totally wrong for the Orange, but definitely in the Terrapins' favor.
Skyler, I could agree with you more. I feel like I've agreed with you all show long, and I gotta claw my way out of the yeah, I guess so. I gotta claw my way out of the bottom of these standings. I was kind of back and forth. I'm like, can this SU team really pull off an upset and a statement win at the start of the season? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a close game. I got Maryland winning 15-14. It's a thriller. Anytime, whether it's men's or women's, Maryland and Syracuse get together, it's always a really, really good game. I think this is a high-scoring game. I think that SU defense is really tested today. I got 15-14. It's going to be a fun one, Srikar, but I don't think Kayla Trainor's group can pull out the win.
It is a tough pick to make, and of course, we talked about both these teams having a ton of change on both sides, I'm going to go 14-11 Maryland here in our quest for 3-0. All three of us have to lock in and start 1-0, so this is the starting point. I'm going to go 14-11 Maryland in this one. It should be a close game, but I do think Maryland ends up getting it done. But flipping over to the men's side, this is where things get even more interesting. AJ, who do you got in this one? It's going to be a close battle. We talked about it in length. Who you got?
I got a big revenge game, Skyler. Last season was a heartbreaker. In overtime, Gary Gates' group, it looked like they had that game. They should have had that one. They lost in overtime. I mentioned it. The key for Syracuse, keep this game out in overtime. Anytime the Terrapins go into OT, they tend to win the game. The other key is make sure they don't score 10 goals, because when they score 10 goals, they win. Keep them out of overtime. Keep them under 10 goals. You get a win. What's my score prediction? I got Syracuse getting 10 goals, Maryland 7, a 10-7 SU win. Huge win for Gary Gates' group. They really show that they are the #1 team in the country because, spoiler alert, Notre Dame hasn't played a game yet. So really, they are the best team in the country because they'll be off to a 4-0 start and a big win over Maryland at College Park.
I was really torn thinking about this game because Maryland has just always had the upper hand. 6 wins in a row. Syracuse hasn't won at College Park since 1983, I think it was, which is centuries ago at this point. So you really want to hand it to the Terrapins. But this just seems to be not necessarily Syracuse's year to win a national championship, but just to get the job done. Even though the goalmouth still exists in lacrosse, which is what doomed Syracuse a year ago, the Orange can have this one in the bag. 15-10 is the final.
You got 10 though. You got to be careful.
You're right. But I have trust in Joey Spallina with Luke Roa. This is just such a talented team that Maryland doesn't have the pieces to keep up.
And I'll go 11-10 Syracuse here. Another close one, but got to put respect on the defenses here. It should be pretty low scoring. But men's basketball, we had 2 straight close games. Skyler, do we have a third in store here?
I'm going to be short with you here, Srikar. Absolutely not.
85-70
in favor of the Tar Heels, who are really top of the ACC in almost every offensive category. Syracuse towards the bottom in every defensive category. RJ Davis, I think, could really go off in this game. Syracuse's offense just doesn't have enough to get over that hump, and the defense is going to fall apart.
I got 80-75. UNC gets the win. I think Syracuse does keep it close. Every time they have a bad loss, they tend to respond a little. At home, they tend to play a little bit better. I don't think they have enough. I think J.J. Starley needs to have a huge game if they want to win. He's got to start off really good. He's got to get 10-15 points in that first half. Keep it close. I think they do, but I don't think they get over the hump, and it's another damaging loss for Adrian Autry.
Did we all just agree? Because I'm going 71-57. Are we all locked in on the same picks here?
We'll either be at the top of the standings or the bottom.
Okay, I guess we're in it together. But For Skyler Wilkes, AJ Myers, and myself, we wanted to thank you for tuning in to this live edition of Cuse Countdown. I know we're all tired of talking, but this is what we love doing. We love talking ball. This is what we do. So once again, thank you for joining us on the countdown. We'll see you next time.